Thank everybody for coming out. We're going to get everybody out of here by the time the snow comes, which is 5 o'clock. So we'll be out of here by 5. We're going to have a lot of laughs and a lot of tears this afternoon. I pulled some old archive material that I'll tell you where you can get it soon. But it's going to be tough to capture Bill's spirit or remember Bill's spirit or his legacy this afternoon. I want to move back 10 years ago, I guess it was. I've known Sam Carchidi longer than I knew Bill or most of the people in this room. Sam and I went to college together. He lives in Winona, I live in Woodbury Heights. We live right next door to each other. Our kids went to school together. And Sam let me know that he was working on a book on Bill Campbell and could I help out. So we sat in Sam's kitchen 10 years ago trying to pick out the audio that he wanted to put in the book. Picked it out. Sam came over a few days later and I set up a microphone in my den. Please turn off your cell phones. Set up a microphone in my den and Sam recorded the tracks for the CD that you can find in Sam's book, which he's got some if you need to buy it. If you really want to know more about the life of Bill Campbell, there's nobody better to do it than my friend Sam Carchidi. Ladies and gentlemen, Sam Carchidi.
Thanks, Bill. I really appreciate it. Bill was my producer. We put together this amazing CD, I think, and it's all Bill's work of all these clips from the 1960 Eagles championship game to Bill calling a Richie Allen Titanic home run and almost anything you can think of. The Will Chamberlain 100-point game in 1962 at Hershey and on and on. I just want to thank Bill publicly for producing that. I want to thank Ray Didinger. Ray did the tremendous forward in the book, but I especially want to thank Chris Campbell, and because Bill was fighting and screaming, he did not want to do this book, and Chris and Chris's mom, Bill's wife, Jo, amazing person herself, they pleaded with Bill, you know, if you don't want to do it for us, do it for the grandkids, do it for the great-grandkids, and that struck a chord with Bill. And I'd say it was about 2 years later, because I talked to him at Citizens Bank Park, and he said he wasn't interested. He said he didn't think his life and his career was interesting enough, imagine that, to justify a book. And I talked to him maybe a few months later about it, and then I just dropped it. And I'd say about 2 years later, out of the blue, Bill said, you know, he called me and he said, you know that book you were talking about? Maybe you ought to go to Ponzio's and sit down and talk about that. Bill loved Ponzio's. And we sat down and he told me then that basically he wanted to do it for his grandkids and his great-grandkids, and it was really a labor of love for both of us. We really had a great time. It was like every Wednesday we'd meet for lunch at my house or his house, and we'd talk for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and I learned so much from him. And Bill mentioned the book tours that we did. Bill at first did not like this book signing tour. He fought, and why do we have to do this? I don't understand this, but he grew to enjoy them. He loved them, actually. We did one in Ocean City, New Jersey, on the boardwalk in Ocean City. And later we talked to people who told us they waited in line for an hour and a half. It was incredible. And we did at least 50 to 70 book signings, but this to me was the most memorable. People waited in line for an hour and a half just to talk to Bill for maybe 2-3 minutes. And he would sign their book and talk to them, and they would exchange memories about something that they both had watched together. And to me, that day was probably the most rewarding for me, as rewarding as writing the book, because going home, I could see the pride and hear the pride in Bill's voice that I think it was then that the light bulb went off, and he mentioned it in that clip we just heard on KYW, the light went off that he actually did touch the lives of these people. And he did connect with these people. And I can't tell you how rewarding it was for me to see Bill so gratified. And just an amazing, amazing person. I learned so much about Bill when we did this book. And I learned that he was tormented. A lot of you probably don't know this, but his mother passed away in childbirth, delivering Bill. Bill was tormented by that. Every year on his birthday, he would feel the pain of that day. I learned so many things that were endearing about Bill. About, I'd say, 10, 11 years ago, he told me a story. He was at a banquet just like this, and he's sitting at a table talking to somebody, and a young boy, maybe 13 years old, hears that magical, gravelly voice. It was gravelly. He used to be a 2-pack-a-day smoker in his early days, and I love that gravelly voice. But anyway, the boy heard his voice and had the gumption to go over to Bill and ask for his autograph. And Bill, being the polite sort, went over and signed it and asked him his name. And Bill was really good at small talk and exchanging pleasantries. And the boy kind of stopped in his tracks. He looked at the autograph and stopped. And Bill didn't know what was going on. He says, is something wrong? And the boy was kind of sheepish. He didn't know what to say, and he didn't want to embarrass Bill. And Bill said, no, tell me, son, what's going on? And the kid looked at the autograph, and he said to Bill, I thought you were Joe Conklin. So to a generation of fans, Joe did the great impersonations of Bill Campbell, and to a generation of fans, that voice was Joe Conklin. And, and I'll tell you a little quick story on that. Bill, at first, hated the impersonations that Joe Conklin did. He truly despised them. He thought that Joe was making fun of him. And then word got back that, they're kind of endearing, and it's a compliment, when somebody is impersonating you. And gradually, it took some time, gradually Bill accepted it, and then he, embraced it. And him and Joe became good friends, they go out to dinner together. So, it was a happy ending. But Bill didn't like change, and it took him a while to get used to things, and it took him a while to get used to the impersonation. And after a while, he really, really loved it. And it's amazing to me when I think that Bill told me that he didn't deserve a book. He wasn't worthy of a book. Here's a man who was in the industry for parts of 9 decades. Think about that. Parts of 9 decades. He started in 1939 at Roman Catholic High School on a radio station. So if you count that year, it's the 1930s. He worked in parts of 9 decades. That just blows my mind. And he connected generations. I said this at the Sports Writers Banquet last week. We honored Bill, and I talked about how he connected generations of athletes. He connected Norm Van Brocklin with Nick Foles. He broadcast Norm Van Brocklin, and he did reports. He did commentaries on Nick Foles. He bridged Robin Roberts and Cole Hamels. He bridged Wilt Chamberlain and Michael Carter Williams, and of course, all athletes in between. And, I thought about this today. This is the first time, honestly, I ever thought about this personally. He also bridged together families. And to share personally, my dad, unfortunately, was a great, great man. He passed away in 1965, and I never thought about this till today. I was only 10 years old when my dad passed away, and so I don't have a lot of memories. He was busy working, and he was a tool and die man. He worked down our basement in Haddon Heights, New Jersey, and he would listen to the Phillies games at night. He'd be working all hours, and I would go downstairs. Again, I'm 9, 10 years old, and just to be near him and we would listen to the Phillies games coming out of the radio. And we listened to Bill Campbell. So Bill not only put athletes together and was a bridge for athletes, he was a bridge for families, for fathers and sons, and daughters and fathers, and daughters and mothers, and what a great tribute to the man. He will be with us forever. As Bill said, we will never, ever forget that voice. But again, we would meet maybe once a week, and we would talk about everything and anything. And there were things that I found out after the book came out that actually didn't even make the book, because there's so many things that happened in Bill's life that it was impossible for him to remember everything. Give an example. Vin Scully, who I'm sure everybody knows is the great, great voice of the Los Angeles Dodgers. And Bill called Vin Scully Vinny. And back in the, I guess, late 60s, Bill and Vin Scully would go golfing together. Bill was broadcasting the Phillies games back then. And this one time they were in L.A., and Bill stayed at Vin's house because they were going to get up early and go golfing. So Bill's there waiting for Vin to get out of the shower and so they can head to the golf course. And all of a sudden there's a knock on the door, and Bill answers it. He looks out the window and he sees a limo pulls up on the driveway, and the limo driver comes out, knocks on the door, and Bill says, "Can I help you?" And he said, "Is Vin here?" And he said, "Oh, Vinny's in the shower. Well, we're going golfing right now. Can I help you with anything?" He said, "Oh, no, I had to talk to him." And Bill looks out of the limo, and the window goes down, and Bill looks out, and Ronald Reagan pops out of the window. And Bill waves to him. He was the governor of California, of course, at the time, and Ronald Reagan waves back to him. But I said, "Bill, what?" This is after the book came out. I said, "Bill, why don't you tell me that story while we were doing the book?" He said, "There's so many things happen. I can't remember everything." But that's just an example. Bill, Bill was with everyday people. He was with famous people, but he was always the same. He was always from the heart. He was always honest. He would thrive today with all this Bill Belichick news, because he would tell it like it is, and we would hear his commentary, his biting commentary on KYW, and it would be spot on. And I miss that. I really do. But before I leave here, I just want to say that when I started to do the book, a friend of mine from childhood, he said something to me, and it really hit home. I told him I was doing a book on Bill Campbell, and he said to me, that voice is tattooed to our soul. And I thought, you know what, that's really poetic. And for all broadcasters, Wheels, you're one, and Merrill, you're another. I mean, you don't realize the impact that you have on people. And your voices and Bill's voice, really, the voice is tattooed to our soul. And I can't think of a nicer compliment to Bill Campbell. Bill was a humble man, and actually the title of the book, this shows you how humble he is. My original title of the book was Bill Campbell, the Voice of Philadelphia. And Bill thought about it, and I could see he wasn't totally happy with it. The next day he called me and he says, "I'm not the voice of Philadelphia. John Facenda is the voice of Philadelphia." So we changed the name, we slightly, Bill Campbell, the voice of Philadelphia sports. And Bill said, "We got it right now. That's it." And I think you'll agree, in the city's long history of greats, Bill was the voice of Philadelphia sports, and in my mind, he always will be. I thank you for your time, and I thank Bill Campbell, the voice of Philadelphia sports.
Sam mentioned Ponzio's. The night that Bill died, I was driving home, and on the marquee out in front of Ponzio's restaurant, they put up, "We will miss you, Bill Campbell." How many people get that and kind of recognition from ordinary people. Getting back to Sam's book, the gentleman that did the foreword to the book is Ray Didinger, who writes in that foreword, "When Bill does a KYW radio commentary, I sit up and pay attention. His is a voice to be hated and cherished." That's something I think we could all wish we could be called. Ladies and gentlemen, Ray Didinger.
Thanks, Bill. There really isn't much that I can add to what Sam has already written and said about Bill and what we already know. The thing that and I know Chris and I have talked about this, Merle and I have talked about this a lot, is as kids who grew up in this area, we grew up listening to Bill. I mean, Merle has talked a lot, and I'm sure when he comes up here, he'll talk again about how he always listened to Bill do the Eagles games and how listening to Bill broadcast an Eagles game influenced the way that Merle calls it today. A lot of the stuff you hear Merle do so well, setting the formation, painting the picture, to a degree that's far, in my view, far better than any of the other play-by-play guys. When I was at NFL Films, I heard them all. Nobody does it better than Merle in terms of painting a picture so you can actually see what's happening. Really, it's true. And, you know, and Merle says all the time, I learned that from Bill. I learned that from listening to Bill. And I'm sure, you know, Chris, and the way Chris described baseball, much the same thing. And Bill was a tremendous influence with me. One of the things that I remember about him, in addition to, and I'm sure these guys will tell many stories about, as a kid, having the transistor radio under your pillow, listening to the Phillies games from the West Coast. I see Chris laughing. I know he did it, so did I. And it was Bill. It was Bill's voice that put you to sleep every night, and I mean that in a good way. You kind of went to sleep. You know, if he'd said that Johnny Callison had just hit a home run, you kind of just drifted off to sleep with a smile on your face. And he was a very big part of upbringing. And I remember going to Eagles training camp when they were in Hershey, and I was just a little kid, and being just as excited when I would see Bill Campbell walk by as any of the football players, because to me, they were one and the same. They were part of the same sort of Sunday experience, the same sort of Sunday emotion. And the thing that I really admired about Bill, well, two things. One of them was just the wonderful generosity and warmth of his spirit, as much as anything. When I first got hired by the Philadelphia Bulletin and walked into a press box in Philadelphia, it's not the most welcoming place when you're a 23-year-old guy stepping into the business. Not everybody rushes up to say hello. Not everybody rushes up to say, is there anything I can do to help you? Just let me know. The first guy that did it for me was Bill Campbell. The first guy that came up and said, put his hand out and said, hey, you know, I know who you are. Welcome. If there's anything I can do for you, just let me know. And that was Bill. And it meant the world to me because I fully knew who he was and I fully knew what he represented. And the fact that he was rolling out the carpet for me meant the world to me. And that's the kind of person that he was. So that's one thing. That's just the warmth of the man himself. But the other thing that I really admire, and I think that really kind of set Bill apart, in addition to the versatility, the fact that he did every sport. I mean, when you were a kid here, he did the Phillies, he did the Eagles, he did the Warriors. I mean, every sport, every season, Bill's voice was what linked those seasons in your mind. And so that versatility is unique. And that's what I remember. And I also remember the fact that he, as a Philadelphia guy, he understood everything. He had this great reservoir of knowledge. And even as the years went by, and he was older and a real veteran guy, and working at KYW and working at WIP, he remained contemporary to the times. I mean, it would have been very easy for Bill in the latter stages of his career to just spend all of his time reminiscing about Wilt's 100-point game in Hershey, or Van Brocklin winning the championship. I mean, he could have just done nothing but talk about the past, but he didn't, because he stayed up with the current times. And I remember Bill, I mean, he could talk just as forcefully and just as emotionally and just as passionately about Allen Iverson as he did about Wilt Chamberlain, because he remained current with what was going on. And that was really a great quality of his. And I know, and Sam made a point of this in his book, which is worth noting was, in addition to being a great broadcaster, Bill was a terrific writer. And you could hear it in his broadcasting. Those monologues, those little soliloquies that he opened all of his shows at WIP with were beautifully, beautifully written. And I remember I still have the program from the 1960 NFL championship game, Eagles-Packers. I've saved it all these years. And if you go back to that book now, and I do from time to time, I like to remember when the Eagles were world champions. So I kind of keep this close at hand. When I really get depressed, I'll sometimes go back to it and say, oh yes, I do remember those times. If you go back through it, there's a story written by a writer from the Philadelphia Inquirer, there's a story written by a writer from the Philadelphia Bulletin, there's a story written by a writer from the Green Bay Gazette. But the best story in that book is the story written by Bill Campbell. I mean, he just outwrote all those guys. And that's the quality that he had. That was his ability to tell a story. And in my view, he's really still, always was, and probably will remain unsurpassed in his ability to do that, to paint a picture and tell a story and bring to you, the listener, just the heartbeat and the pulse of what's happening in the stadium at that time. And that, combined with his warmth and his good humor, is what makes him special. And that's why we're all here today. And I just think that he was a real treasure. And the fact that we're here today and talking about him, and the fact that we'll be thinking about him for as long as there's sports in Philadelphia, I think is perhaps the greatest tribute we can pay. So thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here with everyone.
One of the favorite photographs I have was taken September 7th, 2013. Bill's 90th birthday, and I'm standing here with Bill and our next speaker, Merrill Reese. Ladies and gentlemen, Merrill Reese.
Thank you very much, Bill and Sam and Ray, and I echo all of what you said. It's amazing. I grew up here, as Ray said, and to me, the greatest broadcaster, the greatest sports broadcaster in this city's history was Bill Campbell. He did it all. He did every sport. And I thought I invented something when I was young. When I was in college, I came up with an idea that I never heard of before. I used to turn down the sounds on my television and turn up Bill Campbell. I thought I invented that, and then I found that everybody else was doing that too. So when people tell me that they do that for our broadcast, I feel very, very honored. But Bill Campbell was the one who inspired me to do that, and I could learn so much by just listening to Bill Campbell. I would go out to Franklin Field. My dad would take me out to Franklin Field, and I would watch a play, and then my eyes would go up to that broadcast booth. It was an underhang under the upper deck. There was a booth that hung there, and there was Bill Campbell, and I would focus my binoculars on Bill Campbell. I saw as much of Bill as I did of the game, and I would go back and forth, and it was amazing. I used to dream that maybe someday I would be up in that booth. I came to the city, and I finally came from the small stations, and I came to WWDB to do news, and they let me do a sports show. And the Phillies used to have a luncheon, and I told this story at Bill's Hall of Fame night here for the Broadcast Pioneers. And I went to that luncheon, and I went up, and I talked to Bill Campbell. I couldn't believe I talked to Bill Campbell. That was the first time I was actually in a room with Bill Campbell. And I came home, and I went up to my mother, and I said, I had the greatest thrill of my life, better than any game I ever went to. I met Bill Campbell. And not only that, do you know what? Bill Campbell called me Merrill. He knew my name. He called me Merrill. My mother said, because you're wearing a name tag. All the air went out of my balloon. But I did get to know Bill so well, and we talked and we discussed philosophies. I did a book a number of years ago, about 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, called sportscasting, turning your passion into a profession. And I could have gone to Bill to write every single chapter. But I went to Bill for the interview chapter, because never was there a greater interviewer than Bill Campbell. He asked the question that if you were home and you had an opportunity to speak with that person, that was the question that you would ask. And then he got out of the way. And he told me, the art of being a good interviewer starts with being a great listener. And that's what Bill Campbell was. I always thought the greatest interviewer I ever heard in all media was Johnny Carson, because when he had a great guest on The Tonight Show, he got out of the way. And when he had a guest who wasn't very entertaining, he took up the slack, and he was the entertainer. Bill could do that. Bill could make every interview a study in something you just couldn't wait to hear more of, whether it was a great guest or whether it was an average guest. He was the absolute best interviewer I have ever heard. One other thing about Bill, he was a warm, real human being, and really one of the best things that ever happened to my life was being accepted into the Campbell family. And I thought of Bill and Joe as aunts and uncles. Bill was as close to me as anybody in my family. And Chris, you know how I felt about everybody. I was at all your family functions, and your mom and dad were at all of our family functions, and it meant so, so much to me. I will leave you with one story, and that was the fact that Bill Campbell could be dramatic in any situation. It didn't have to be a ball game. Bill would come to my charity golf outing, which is the Terry Lynn Lokoff Child Care Foundation golf outing every year at Green Valley. And he loved to play golf, just as I do. And one day we were gathered around to get the starting instructions, and Kay Lokoff, who was the matriarch of the foundation, pushed the pedal on her golf cart to go forward, and instead she went backwards and hit Bill. And Bill fell over and started moaning, "Oh, I'm hurt. Oh, I'm hurt. I need medical attention." So we got somebody over to get to Bill, and Bill said, "There goes my golf." And he's moaning some more. And a little bit later, he yells, "I can only play 9." He stayed for 18. At any rate, that was the Bill Campbell, the best ever, and we all loved him, and we all miss him. We always will. Thank you very much.
Well, it's nice to hear about all the winning ways of the Warriors and the Eagles in the 1960 championship and 76ers back when they were. But Bill and I will forever be entwined with 9 and 73. We broadcast all 73 of those losses and every one of those 9 wins. Every one of them. And I guess I'm the only guy left to tell that story. But here's breaking news. As a matter of fact, did you ever notice how television stations, I think they get brownie points for every time they say breaking news. Or they try to see how many breaking news we can get in a 1-hour newscast. It's ridiculous. You know, a chicken crossed the road, breaking news. But here's breaking news. If the 76ers beat the Knicks tonight, and there's a very good chance that'll happen because the Knicks are 7 games worse than the 76ers, believe it or not, Bill's record and ours will be forever saved because that will be 9 wins for the 76ers. And I got to believe they're going to win 1 more for the rest of the year. However, there were times when Bill and I would be flying back from the West Coast and we'd be looking at the schedule and we had only won 5 or 6 games and he's looking, nope, can't beat them, can't beat these guys. And you know what? I can't see us beating anybody. And back then, it was true because, you know, back then the Celtics and the Knicks were champs, you know, in the 70s, and the Celtics were the Celtics. And back then, before expansion, you had to play those guys 8 times each. And, hey, that adds up pretty quick to 73 losses when you think about it. But it was a real treat when I was asked to do the 76er games with a gentleman whose career started the year I was born. I mean, y'all talk about listening to Bill Campbell. His career started the year I was born. And the first thought that came to my mind was, how do I compliment Bill Campbell? You know, I mean, how can I add to whatever Bill is going to do? In addition to, I've always felt that Philadelphia is a very, very sophisticated basketball town. I mean, you've got the Big Five, now it's a City Six. You know, Philadelphia basketball fans, they know their stuff, and they know how the college game is played, and if the pros don't play up to that, at least trying, they're not going to come out and watch you. So there were two things that really was a challenge to me, complimenting Bill Campbell and trying to tell anybody watching the games, because we're television broadcasters, what they didn't already see or what Bill hadn't already said. But he made it real easy. And the calm that he had about him belied the fact that it didn't show. He was Buffalo. The Buffalo Braves were part of the NBA back then. And one of the first games we did was at the Buffalo Auditorium, and they had just added 3 stories to the Aud. And guess where they put the broadcast booth? Up on the 9th floor. And, you know, Bill, we're all used to sitting at courtside. So Bill found out that we were broadcasting from the 9th floor of the Aud. Oh, no, wait. And I'm going, wait a minute. He walks out. He walks out. And I don't know where he went. He said something about, I'm going to talk to Eddie Donovan, the general manager, or something like that. And here I am, I think it was the second game into the season, and no Bill Campbell. And so, you know, the national anthem, and I'm reading the starting lineups, and here comes Bill. Halftime, we're going downstairs. Really? We're going downstairs at halftime. He said, but Bill, the phone lines are up here for the broadcast. He said, see those guys down there with the hats on? They're putting in phone lines right now. We're going down to the floor at halftime. We did the first half of the game upstairs and the second half back where we're normally used to doing the games. And I said, you know what makes it all worthwhile? This franchise is going to San Diego next year. Was that a franchise change made in heaven? Buffalo to San Diego became the Clippers and eventually Los Angeles Clippers. But Chris, the day you were married was the day Bill obviously took the day off. And we're playing the Celtics, but we're playing the Celtics in Hartford, Connecticut, because they played some of their games in Hartford. And so I'm by myself, and we were simulcasting. There was no radio guy. No, CAU picked up the audio broadcast. So I try to set everything up so I can have it all set up for halftime because there's nobody there to help me. So I get Don Nelson, former Celtic great, to be my guest at halftime. All set up. I said, Don, meet me here. In the meantime, Johnny Most, who was the Celtics broadcaster back then, he comes up to me and he goes, hey, I understand you got Nelly for your halftime guest. I said, you know, yeah, by the way, where's Soupy? I said, his daughter's getting married today, and he has, oh. And I said, if you want Don Nelson, of course, you're Johnny Most, you could have Don Nelson for a half. No, that's all right. I said, when you're done with him, send him over. I mean, if anybody remembers Johnny Most, he was only about this tall, but he had a threatening voice, just like that. Any other time, you know, I really would have been concerned about it, but he put me at ease, and Bill's lovely daughter got married that day, and everything went smoothly up in Hartford, Connecticut. He always would, there was nothing really that would be amazing to Bill. I mean, the fact that we weren't going to win any more games, I mean, I think when he said that, we managed to win 2 or 3 more games the rest of the year to have that grand total of 9. But his favorite story, and it's in Sam's book, I didn't think too much of it at the time, but he loves this story. And it just goes to show you how perfectionist Bill was. He really was a softy perfectionist, though. I remember Richie Ashburn came up to me that summer after I'd done the first season with the 76ers. He says, "Hey, Tom, how you getting along with Soupy?" I said, fine, Richie. I mean, maybe they had some history, I don't know, but, you know, I'm thrilled to death. You know, we're doing the games, so we're not having a good season, but we're having a good time doing the games. We did the opening game of the Omni in Atlanta, the Sixers and the Atlanta Hawks. And part of my job was to arrange halftime interview. So I figured it's the opening night in Atlanta. Everybody in the world must be here. So I figured the PR guy would come up to me and tell me who he was going to send over to me for a halftime guest. Well, about 2 minutes to go, he tapped me on the shoulder and he said, well, the Braves are in spring training, and there's nobody from the Falcons here in town. I said, well, it doesn't have to be a sports figure. I said, this is the opening night of the Omni, a big arena in Atlanta. Oh, okay. He comes back. And he tells me about a minute later, he said, okay, I got your halftime guest. It's Jimmy Carter. And I said, quizzingly, yes. And the first Jimmy Who joke came out of my lips, and he said he's the governor of Georgia. And I said, I thought Lester Maddox was the governor of Georgia. My history books when I was in high school told me that Lester Maddox was the governor of Georgia. Well, he was up until this year, but now Jimmy Carter is the governor. Okay, well, tell him to meet me under the West Basket, and that's where we'll do the interview. So if you watch Southern football, coaches are escorted by troopers, right? They don't just walk across the field after a game or to an interview spot. They're escorted by the state police, the National Guard, Marines, for crying out loud. Here comes Jimmy Carter shuffling his way over all by himself. Back then he had red hair. When you become president, your hair changes right away. But he had red hair, and he go, Mr. LeMaine? Yes, I'm Jimmy Carter. So we did our interview. After the interview, I got back to the broadcast location, which was at courtside, and Bill, in his inimitable way, said, who the hell was that? I said, funny you should ask, Bill. I said the same thing. That's Jimmy Carter. Well, who the hell's he? I said, he's the governor of Georgia. Okay, well, all right, good. All right, hope it all went well. Yeah, it went fine. But the one thing, you know, that 9-73 year, 10 years later, we won the championship, swept the Lakers in 4 games in L.A., and that really was the crowning moment for me anyway. 80-81, we had all 4 teams went to the championship game, and I was doing sports at Channel 3. And I said, that's it, let's try this weather thing, see how long my career can go after that. But Bill had always maintained that spirit of a broadcast. Merrill had mentioned how he painted the picture. To me, the one thing that always remains with me about Bill was the game we were playing the Cleveland Cavaliers, and back then they were terrible. I think Cleveland, in our 9-73 year, Cleveland only won about a half a dozen more games than we did. And by the way, even though we were 9-73, we didn't get the first pick of the college basketball players. Back then, they had a coin flip. The worst team in the Western Conference flipped a coin with the worst team in the Eastern Conference. Well, we were 9-73. The Portland Trail Blazers won 23 games, but we lost the coin flip. Portland got Bill Walton. 76ers got Marvin Barnes. And to rub further salt into it, a few years later, the Portland Trail Blazers beat the 76ers in the championship game when Dr. Ramsey had left the Sixers and became the coach of the Portland Trail Blazers. But we're playing Cleveland at the old Cleveland Arena. 2 terrible teams in a terrible game. And Bill's broadcasting this game as if it was Game 7 of the NBA Finals. And when we came into a commercial break, I said, Bill, what up? So, what do you mean? I said, I can't believe you're, we're getting blown out by the second worst team in the league, and well, he said, if you lose the passion for the game, get out of the game. And that stuck with me forever. And among all the memories, and I have many of them, Chris, about your dad, that's one that kept me going for a long time. Thank you very much.
Our next guest, when he was named sports director at Action News in 1971, he did a number of local and TV sporting events with Bill. He worked with Bill on Penn football, and Bill also followed him at WIP after his morning and afternoon talk show. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Pellegrino.
Once again, thanks for that sitting ovation. I appreciate that. Chris, let me say one thing about Chris. Missed the hell out of you last season in that booth. I don't mean to disparage the other guys because they tried hard, but it's just another example of if you don't have the right training, you shouldn't be there until you learn your skills. And as far as this table's concerned, we could start our own sports network, guys. You know that, right? Of course, I don't know who would pay us, but anyway. I feel a little cheated because I was born in Washington, D.C., at Georgetown Hospital, as a matter of fact. And I went to American University down there, and we hated Georgetown. When I played basketball down there, they were some of the worst cheaters on the floor that I ever came in contact with. They grab you as you try to slide through in the zones and so forth, and grab your shorts or your shirt and so forth, so you couldn't keep up with the other guy with the ball. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I feel cheated because I didn't get a chance to hear Bill Campbell in his heyday. Although his heyday lasted probably longer than anybody in broadcasting, because the way I looked at it and the way I heard him, it didn't seem that he ever lost anything in his broadcast ability as time wore on. And my first introduction to Bill came very quickly when I became a sports director at Action News, WIP. And as Bill mentioned, we did a lot of local telecasts and sports at that time. A very energetic program, but eventually a lot of it wore down. I mean, we did tennis at the Marion Cricket Club. We did the PGA golf tournament. It was a regular stop in Philadelphia. And we were doing that live. We did Lehigh wrestling, all sorts of stuff. And of course, we did Penn football. Well, I had the honor of being the analyst for one season anyway, before they decided to cut back on all of these local telecasts, and Bill was doing the play-by-play. And I think I finally earned my private first-class stripe with Bill during about the second or third game of the year. Penn had a pretty good football team, and they had some really good running backs. And Penn was down on about the 3-yard line in the game, and they gave it to the fullback, and he got nailed after a 1-yard gain, got down to the 2. Next play, another running back, he got nailed at the 1. So after 2 tries with the running game, I said, well, Bill, it looks like the best play to come up next would be play action. Now, for one or two of you who don't know what play action is, that's simply where the quarterback, fakes the handoff to the running back, but with some hand legerdemain, hides the ball on his hip, and then either takes off one side or the other and throws a quick pass to the end zone. And that's what happened, and they scored a touchdown. And Bill turned to me and he says, how did you know that? I said, Bill, you knew that too, but thanks for the compliment anyway. But I think I did get a little bit of respect that I did know a little something about sports, because I too was like probably every broadcaster in the country, whereby you listen to broadcasts as a kid and you realize, boy, this sounds like fun. You love the game. I mean, I was baseball, basketball fanatic. I played a lot of touch football. I was too skinny to play football. My dad said, if you go out for the football team in high school, don't come home because we're not going to pay your medical bills. And since I love my mother's cooking, I said, well, 2 out of 3 ain't bad. So anyway, by listening to the sportscasts, it allows you to really understand and emphasize how important the English language is and to be able to pronounce words correctly. And really, it was, a basic English class every time you turned on the radio and listened to the sportscasters because they did a pretty darn good job. I grew up with a guy by the name of Bob Wolf, who was the Washington Senators announcer, and an old gentleman named Arch McDonald, who often said at the end of an inning, he'd say, well, I'm going to go over here in the corner and visit my friend, Mr. Daniels. Well, Mr. Daniels was a bottle of Jack Daniels about that. I mean, that's kind of old Southern humor he had there, but that was Arch McDonald. The Bob Wolf, I actually got to know him even better because my first radio job in radio news was WWDC Radio, and Bob Wolf was the sports director at that station, which was the best news station in Washington. And Bob went on to become a great announcer at NBC, and he's the guy that called Don Larson's perfect game when he beat the Dodgers in the perfect no-hitter way back in 1956. And I was in high school then, late high school, senior year, but I was pinned to a television that day, and it was just an amazing thing. But Bob was a good guy and a very good announcer. But when I came to Philadelphia, I realized that this place was a gold mine of television and radio announcers, and Bill Campbell was certainly right at the top of the mountain. In going down the list of things that I wanted to talk about, we obviously got to know each other not only after Penn football, but just running into each other at news conferences. He was the ultimate gentleman. Treated everybody great. I mean, I never heard him say a nasty word to anybody in all the times that I was in his presence. And in his book, as Tommy said, and Sam put down to paper, that when you are a broadcaster, no matter how bad the game is, if you don't maintain your level of enthusiasm, then you're going to lose listeners. And it's not to say that you're lying about what's going on there because you're still enthusiastic, even if you're losing by 25 or 30 points, or 35 points like the Sixers lost the other night. You just have to maintain your standard of broadcasting, and Bill did it to the nth degree. And I always admired him for anything like that. Also, we had one dispute, and Bill was one of the guys, as was mentioned here earlier, that didn't like change very well. And I became a big advocate of instant replay. Tony Verna, who just died in the past week of CBS, he invented instant replay. And the reason was he could see things on the field that were wrong, called wrong, but the replay proved it right, but the NFL had no rule about it. Now, they took so long to instigate it simply because it cost a lot of money to put all that equipment in, to hire new people, shake out the problems with replay and so on and so forth. But one of the incidents that came to my mind was the fact that I think in a Minnesota game, there was a referee who made a call in a Vikings game, and some guy threw a beer bottle at him, and it hit him in the head, and if it didn't kill him, it left him debilitated for the rest of his life. I said, and that's when they went to paper cups as far as regular bottles are concerned in all the stadiums because of these projectiles. So anyway, Bill and I went around on that, and he said, well, I don't want to change the game. You got to leave you got to leave it to the health, or rather the regular eyes and the man's judgment on the field. You can't make it an electronic game. I said, Bill, we're in an electronic age. I said, it's time that we get the calls right. Not only that, the officials would be a lot safer because they're kind of taken out of it depending on what the replay is. I mean, go watch a tennis match and see how often they use the perfect TV shot where it shows whether the ball is in or out of the court. That's just one aspect. Hockey has done it now. Basketball has done it. And we've finally arrived at that age, thank God, that the games are called more correctly. And they're an aid to the referees and the umpires and so forth. So, and baseball is even going to expand it a little more now, as a matter of fact, with trap balls in the outfield. So anyway, he never fully liked it. I'm not sure until his dying day that he really acquiesced to it. But I loved his arguments. And he would stand toe-to-toe and say, no, it's still wrong, you know. So that was the way it was. But not long ago, about 6 or 7 months ago, right here in one of our functions, as you know, Bill in his later years was losing his hearing. And we were sitting about over in there, and we had a dais up there with people, and they were talking about different issues. I don't even know exactly what the topics were. But Bill nudged me and he said, "Hey, Joe," he says, "what the hell are they talking about up there?" And I said, "Bill, do you want a treatise or do you want the highlights?" I said, "Give me the highlights, give me the highlights." So I gave him about 2 or 3 of the different topics. And he said, "That's a waste of time. I'm leaving." And he got up and walked out. I mean, it was beautiful in the way he did it. And as a matter of fact, the luncheon ended very shortly right after that point. But the fact remains that he was a star in his own right. He was a gentleman. I know that I went to the viewing of when he lost Joe, and I really felt for him because he looked like a man had really lost a good part of his soul, not his soul, but his heart, obviously, with the loss of Joe. And you know, it's tough to really stand there with him without shedding a tear myself. But my remembrances of him will always be top class, #1 guy. And I'm just thankful that I had the opportunity not only to meet him, but to work with him and enjoy his company and his expertise and his broadcast talent. Thank you very much.
That goes on, and it's in the book, by the way. I'm going to hawk this as long as I can. One of the guys who was in the booth next to them is our next speaker, who worked with Bill on Big 5 basketball. Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Baker.
Well, like a lot of you, my introduction to Philadelphia sports was Bill Campbell. I wasn't a bad athlete as a young guy. Would like to have played professionally, as again, I'm sure many of you would have. But when you come to that realization that you're not good enough, then maybe you think if there's an alternative way of making it to the big leagues, as it were. The first Bill Campbell broadcast that I remember was Penn football in 1959. That Penn team was coached by Steve Sebo. They went 7-1-1. And I remember listening to the Navy game. Navy was still pretty good. Remember, Joe Bellino came along in '60 and Roger Staubach in the early '60s. But it was just so exciting. And I know a couple of the other speakers mentioned the drama in Bill's voice and his ability to paint a picture. I felt like I was there at Franklin Field, home of the Penn Quakers. And by the way, Chris, I have to say, you are your father's daughter. At the sports writers banquet the other Friday, and Ron Corbin and Larry Litwin, you guys did such a great job there. Sam Carchidi acknowledged Bill's great career, and Chris accepted the recognition for her dad. And just like her father, it was so beautifully written and majestically delivered, Chris. Some of my other Bill Campbell remembrances growing up, I mentioned the '59 Penn broadcast. I loved all the Philadelphia teams. But the first Big Five team that I really followed was Jack Kraft's Villanova Wildcats, 61-62. Bill Campbell did the play-by-play on WCAU 1210. The center, this was Jack Kraft's first year as head coach of the Wildcats, replacing Al Severance. And the center was a 6', 3.5" athlete out of West Philadelphia High School, Hubie White. The forwards were Jim McMonagle and Jim O'Brien. The guards were Wally Jones and George Leftwich, a pair of talented sophomore guards. And that team went 21-7. But I can remember I listened to most of those games, and I listened to Bill Campbell's dramatic calls. And I can remember Villanova playing St. John's, and they had a center named Leroy Ellis, 6'11". And I remember Bill saying, Leroy Ellis going up for a hook. Whoa, Hubie White blocks it. Hubie, just 6', 3.5". But, you know, the excitement in Bill's voice, and it just captivated you. You heard some of the stuff about the 64 Phillies. I think we all died 1,000 deaths that September. What a great year. But, you know, listening to Bill throughout the year and the exploits of the Rookie of the Year, Richie Allen, and Johnny Callison, and Jim Bunning, Chris Short, Art Mahaffey, Jack Balchin, all the players, and Bill's vivid descriptions, good or bad, it was just so great. Here comes 1 run, here comes 2 runs, here comes Mock. And boy, you would just, no matter where you were, you had to sit up and pay attention. Bill told me in Bill's later years, like perhaps some of you, he did not like driving at night. So when we would both get invited to a sports event, I would sometimes pick him up in Haddonfield. And we had a chance to talk sports a little bit. And of course, my forte is public address announcing. You know, Bill did some PA for the Philadelphia Athletics. And he told, this was in the 40s, and he just substituted for a game here and there. He filled in. But he told me how, of course, he was doing the radio show with Connie Mack. And he told me that Mr. Mack, I think everybody called him Mr. Mack in those days, called him up to the press box, and he told him that he wanted him to do the PA because whoever was doing the public address announcing was unavailable for that game. So Bill dutifully went upstairs and took his notes and then took his position right next to the home team dugout on the field level and did the PA as meticulously as he does everything else. He did a great job for the Philadelphia Athletics. When we heard Harry Callis, and wasn't that a great segment with Harry and Bill and Richie? I came to love Harry Callis, as I know all of you did too. But I did not like Harry when he first came here. And the reason was he replaced Bill Campbell. I felt as if Bill deserved to stay in that position. I thought he was a terrific play-by-play voice. And I grew up with other, and you did too, other wonderful play-by-play voices. Byram Som, that velvety smooth voice. And Gene Kelly. I love Gene. He could really turn a phrase, couldn't he? And he had a great sense of humor. But Bill was the one who, to me, was so passionate, and he cared about his teams so much. And he was the one that I related to and thought that if I was lucky enough to get into sportscasting someday, I would want to emulate. Bill was very principled, and some sportscasters are branded as homers. They always want their team to win. Bill always played it by the book. I can remember when Bill was doing the play-by-play for Big Five basketball in the early 80s, and St. Joseph's was playing West Virginia, and at the very end of the game, West Virginia was trailing. The buzzer was about to go off, and a shot was taken by one of the Mountaineers, and one of their forwards went up above the rim and dunked it in just before the buzzer. I thought it was offensive goaltending. At the time, I wasn't doing the broadcast, but I was there as the executive director of the Big Five. So Bill brought me on. He was doing the play-by-play to ask my opinion, and which I told him. I thought, it was offensive goaltending. I said, yes, the basket was scored before the game ended, and if it was legal, it would have given the Mountaineers the victory over St. Joseph's. But I felt that it was offensive goaltending, that his hands were in the cylinder. Bill said, I don't think so. And he was explaining his visualization. But many sportscasters probably would have just gone for the home team, but not Bill. He wanted to get it right. Later, I produced a lot of Big Five basketball on the radio and worked with a number of great people in this room in doing that. And we took our radio package to WIP in the late 80s. And at the time, I was doing the play-by-play and talking with Art Camiola, who was the general manager at the WIP. He said, well, if we carry your package, we want you to use Merrill Reese and Bill Campbell, a dream team of play-by-play announcers. Well, one of the reasons I produced the Big Five package was also to provide a forum for my own skills. I thought, oh, geez, I'm going to not have an opportunity. But my gosh, to get two Hall of Fame sportscasters to do your play-by-play and thinking of the exposure that would mean for the Big Five, that was an agreement that we jumped at. So I want to thank Bill for the example that he set on the floor, off the floor, and for helping to stir my interest to get into this business. So, Chris, congratulations. What a wonderful legacy, and thank you for having me today.
Bill always told it like it was, as he saw it.
Thank you, Bill. I did not know I was going to get up here to speak today, so I didn't get dressed up, and they kicked me out of that table early. So that's the way they are over there. Wow, what a way to get introduced. He was special. And let me go back real quick because we obviously didn't beat the snow, and I know people want to get out of here. But I met him in 1960. I was dating, or whatever the heck you did when you were 15 years old, 1960. But my girlfriend, her name was Susan Harvey, and her dad happened to be Ed Harvey, who was one of the great personalities in this town. And Ed Harvey was doing the Eagles games with Bill. And I got introduced to Bill Campbell at that time. I went to the championship game in 1960, sat in section ED, row 1, saw the last time the Eagles won their championship. And it was because of Ed Harvey and Bill Campbell. And I remember the first time I met him, just like a lot of the guys have gotten up here and talked about, I really thought this was royalty. I mean, I could give a damn about Ed Harvey, but I just met Bill Campbell. It was hard to explain when you're a 15-year-old kid and this is one of your idols and you meet this man. Later on, Bill lived in Broomall, and Chris, on Stony Creek Drive, I believe it was. Anyway, my buddy Ed Pappas from Marple Newtown High School lived across the street. We used to go play touch football in the backyard, and we used to imitate Bill. And we, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45. And we would try and get as loud as we could because we wanted him to come over. We wanted him so much to come over and somehow describe this nonsense that we were doing in the backyard because our hero was across the street. I told him that story later on, and he basically said, why the hell would I have done that? Well, I care about you and Eddie Pappas back then. And when you knew Bill, that was the essence of him. He was so honest about things. And fast forward to years later when I was lucky enough to start to work with the Phillies, and we would get together and talk. Some of the guys mentioned, but By Sam and Gene Kelly and those guys who were doing the games when we were kids, and I got to know Bill and would talk to him. In 1977, I got thrown on the air all of a sudden, and I was scared to death. And I know people were out there saying, "What the heck's he doing in there?" Like a lot of them were when I left. What did he ever go in there for? He never played. He didn't belong in there and all that. One of the first people that called me, this kind man, was Bill Campbell. And he said, "You are really good at this." He said, "You've got a lot to learn about some things." He said, "But you have a feel for it, and don't let anybody get you down about it." And from that day on, we had so many conversations over the years. He would call me, I would call him, we would sit and have dinner so many nights in the press room. We would sit there and have dinner. And I know he did a lot of other sports, but he loved baseball. Baseball was his number one thing. He and Whitey just to hear him and Whitey together brought back so many memories, because when Whitey would start with one of those things, you never knew where he was going to go. You knew he was going to get into your personal life. Harry and I would just turn white because he really didn't care what he said, and he could get away with anything, and he would just start sucking on that pipe, and you thought, "Oh no, they're going to find out about this about us." And just to hear Bill on there with him and that wonderful, wonderful line, "As I was so rudely interrupted, 22. You think about that. This is a man who loved what he was doing as much as anything in the world. He loved doing Phillies baseball. He told me that. We talked about that so many times. And all of a sudden, this guy from Houston comes out of nowhere and hires another guy from Houston and kicks him out of his dream job. And how did he handle that? He handled it with the ultimate class of the guy that he was. And Harry really appreciated that. Harry Callis was tough on him when he first came here and that happened, but he really genuinely appreciated that Bill welcomed him and accepted him. I have so many great memories of being around the man, and day after day when you would sit with him, you would just realize that you were with greatness. We were so lucky to grow up with him in this town. He used to call me. He was born on September 7th. Bill Giles was born on September 7th. My dad, who I lost in 1965 when I was only 19 years old, was born on September 7th. So Bill used to call me and remind me that his birthday was coming up because, he used to like a plug once in a while on the air. I say, "Bill, I can never forget your birthday because you were born the same day as two of the other most important people in my life." He said, "Well, you're including me in that group?" I said, "Absolutely. To know you and to love you the way we all did all those years, and know you were born on the same day as my dad, amazing." Last thing, and some of the guys have said so many great things about him when they came up here, but the man had a kindness about him and a caring about him. He really did. He genuinely wanted to know how you were and how things were going. This day and age, when there's so much mean-spiritedness out there, and so many people go on the air and they're just nasty. Bill Campbell was the ultimate professional. He would never, ever, ever do that. And if he heard you do that, he would probably tell you to cut it out. I will have all these great, great memories about him. It's so neat to be in the company of all these great people over here at this table to get up and do their memories about him. And I just really appreciate the opportunity that you afforded me here today to be able to get up here and tell you how much I love that guy, too. So thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, the man of 1,000 voices, Joe Conklin.
We had a wonderful afternoon and you had to go there, huh? Just having a great time, just sitting back and listening to everybody. Wheels, you hit it right on the head there. And Dan, this is a guy who really, he didn't have to muster up any energy or, excitement. Bill was always like, and Joe and Tom were, we're putting us up on a nice floor. Oh, sorry about that. Bill was always ready to go, always ready to go. And Chris, it's got to feel great just sitting back and listening to everybody talk and singing your dad's praises. And he just was a class act. I mean, it's just, Look at all the lives he's touched. I mean, and we grew up with him, and if you were in my house, we're a bunch of hams. Everybody in my house imitated Bill.
Well, where are you going? Oh, I go down the rack. Where are you going? Oh, my, you believe that? You believe it's over here? Well, it's 9:30. You were supposed to be in an hour ago. Oh, my.
It's just the way it was. Everybody did Bill Campbell, you know. Sam was telling that story about, oh, no, I forget. No, I remember the first time, one of the first times I met Bill. I met him one time, and he doesn't remember. But when I started imitating him on WIP, of course, we took everything out of context, like you just heard. And Morgani comes up to me and said, "You better watch that Bill Campbell stuff. He's starting to get a little annoyed." I said, "Oh, God, are you kidding me?" So he was in every day after us, or at least part-time. So Bill was in a lot. So I approached him after the show, and I said, "Hello, Bill. My name's Joe Conklin. I'm the guy that's been imitating you."
Oh, how you doing, Joe? Very nice to meet you.
Al was telling me that you're upset at some of the things I've been saying.
No, I'm not upset at all. It's not me, Joe. It's my daughter, and she's an attorney.
But, Sam did that great book, Bill Campbell, the voice of Philadelphia sports, and the CD attached with all the actualities. I mean, it's you got to listen to it, and we're listening to a lot of the cuts here. You know, whether he was doing the calls, the Big Eagles called the championship, the Wilt Chamberlain, the 100 points.
There it is. It's inside. They got a zipper dunk. A zipper dunk. He did it. Fans are entering the court.
You know, Bill just had that energy. It was like all him, you know. He was all over it. And then, of course, the commentaries on KYW. I'm just sitting here thinking, well, we miss him. You know, we just miss Bill. I mean, he was a constant. He was, he just never went away. And CBS always put him on. He stopped doing the show. He always came back, and he would do a weekend, or, he would do those commentaries. There was Fridays, a
Reporters Roundup.
we hear him on KYW. And it's bittersweet. It's sad. We all miss him. And Bill, Sam was saying, yeah, he eventually came around to the impression, and he couldn't fight it anymore because it was on every day. And I guess like Harry Gamble lived next door to him or across the street, and used to rib him about it constantly. So we got to become friends. And that was my, I used to have to entertain at Tavistock every year. He had the golf outing, and that was my payment for using his voice. I gladly did it. And he was just the nicest guy in the world. Everybody in here knows it. He was just awesome. And they had me, Bill actually had a, what was this, from an old broadcast? This is a column. TV Digest. TV Digest, wow. TV Digest. Bill had a recipe of crackers, cheese dip for crackers that this got published. I don't know how, of all the great things this guy has done.
Oh, they're masterpieces I have written over the years. The opening commentaries, they wrestle up.
Anyway, so I'll do it in Bill's voice.
I guess Joe was getting on me about not doing the dishes, and she replied, "If you were a real husband like George Walsh, you would come up with these cute recipes and cook your own snacks, and then I would gladly do the dishes." So like a sport, I agreed to the challenge. I finally came up with this taste tempter, which I think,
I can't even see anymore. I'm using Dan Baker's glasses.
Look through them, Joe. They're bifocals at the bottom.
anyway, here it is, Welsh rarebit or rabbit, if you like. 1 tablespoon butter or margarine, half a pound of American cheddar cheese grated, a few grains of salt, half tablespoon of dry mustard, half a cup of beer or ale, very important ingredient, 1 egg. They call it rarebit or rabbit. It's still one of the best dishes ever dreamed up or ever eaten by man. Place the butter or margarine along with the grated cheese in the top of your double boiler. Add the salt and mustard. When the cheese begins to melt, gradually stir in the beer. Once the beer is all in, beat the mixture. Beat holy hell out of that mixture. Beat the mixture briskly until it's smooth and satiny. Then beat an egg slightly and add the cheese mixture. Continue cooking, stirring constantly until the rarebit is velvety and as thick as heavy cream. Served with hot, dry toast or cold beer. Plenty for four enthusiasts.
And that was it. And you know what? The great thing about that was, that shows Bill's humanity. He was a legend. He was the guy on the radio and the television as kids growing up, but he was also, a great person, a friend, a guy, a dad, your granddad, your uncle. And when he would retire, he would call up the station. Joe Wechter would answer the phone, and he'd put me on, and
What's going on? What's going on? Is Bigby still driving everybody crazy?
Bill wanted to know the scoop, and of course, you guys were saying, I don't know if I ever heard Bill say an unkind word about anyone. Well, don't drag Bigby's name into but what a great afternoon, and I'm pleasure to be a part of it. And he was just the best, simply the best. Thank you so much. Take care.
Time for the tears. Tell you how considerate Bill's family was about what's going on in sports. They had to figure out when they could have his viewing and funeral mass so it wouldn't compete with the Eagles games. Were they going to play in the afternoon? Were they going to play at night? And I guess we didn't know until like Thursday before the game or something like that. Carrying on the legacy for her dad and her mom, Chris Campbell.
Very difficult to follow all of these class acts, and you as well. Thank you so much to the broadcast pioneers. My dad loved being a part of this organization, and my mom loved coming with him to many of these events, and I have absolutely no doubt that Dad's spirit is sitting on that speaker and Mom's is over there, and they're enjoying this afternoon every bit as much as I am. I thank everyone who came to reminisce and to bring laughter and good memories and a minimum of tears to such a great crowd. What I heard running through what all of you said was a class act. And I described my dad that way in my eulogy. He certainly was the embodiment of that term. But he was very human, as you also have said. He could grouch at you, and he could tell you, we're not doing that game from up here, we're moving, and he would make it happen. He could share unhappiness. He could share disappointment because he had been there. He loved Bala. He was a member here for many years. It is true he missed a game for my wedding. The reception took place here. It was a great party, but the marriage did not take. And he welcomed the chance to come back here from time to time and enjoy a place where my family had shared so many great moments. Dad, you are correct, loved baseball. He loved all sports, but baseball was his true passion. And yes, he was disappointed when he was no longer there every day. But I think sliding back into the broadcasting booth with Harry and Richie and making it easy for them as well as comfortable for himself, as he did in that moment that you heard, was Dad. That was how he conducted himself. And that was what made me so proud. I remember that day. He left the house at about 9:30. He would not let my mother or I go to that game. We had to sit home and listen to it. I'm sure that he went to the field and walked it, watched batting practice, talked to the coaches, to the managers, looked at the lineup, and prepared himself, as he did for every single thing that he was involved in. And rather than be egotistical or making it about him in that moment as he sat down to resume his old position, he made it easy for everybody and sounded like he had never missed a beat. Those were the lessons that I could take from him as his daughter. I'm a lawyer, and I say that with pride. I went back to school later in life and became a lawyer at the age of 38. And my dad was behind me all the way. He would slip me checks every summer to pay for my tuition in the fall. And he was there to push me through as I studied for the bar exam. And no one was prouder when I got my degree than he was. And I told him once that the thing I learned from him in his work was out-prepare everybody, and then you'll win. That has worked for me, and I learned it from him. And I take that lesson with me as I move forward and I take memories with me. I'm going to leave you with one last story and then we can all get on the road. It's quite true that when my mom passed away last January, it was a year ago yesterday, that was the toughest thing that life ever asked of my father. And any of you who stayed in touch with him, called him, saw him, could tell me, yes, you could see that he really didn't want to be here without her. That was the nature of their devotion to each other. And he had some very, very tough days. And I had some tough days with him. However, I would stop and see him every night. And in the summer, we watched probably more Phillies games than we ever had in our entire lives. And in those months, I got to know him all over again because I think girls tend to sit down and yap with their mothers and the fathers sit back and take a back seat. And suddenly I had all this time with Dad. And one of my warmest memories as I go on without both parents is remembering my dad on the summer nights last year, sitting in his big blue reclining chair with a cup of vanilla ice cream, his big treat, and I would be sitting in his wheelchair in his little studio apartment, and we'd put the game on. And he would sit there and watch. He loved pitchers, and he really liked Cole Hamels, but he loved to watch pitching. And he would sit there munching on his ice cream, and I would hear him as the pitcher was delivering the ball, fastball, curveball, slider, cutter. He was calling the game. And he would describe the pitch a second or two before Tom McCarthy would say, slider, fastball, cutter. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, you know, he's going to be working until he's gone, until he can't be here anymore. And he was. In the hospital, as we moved him into hospice care after a bad fall, he would be talking. And it didn't always make sense, but all of a sudden I would hear Veterans Stadium, I would hear Connie Mack Stadium. He was back in his head doing the thing he loved the most. And that was bringing pictures, as you said, to anyone who wanted to turn on the radio, turn on the TV, and listen and enjoy a game. That was Dad. I am blessed to have been both his daughter and my mother's daughter. He would have been the first to say he would have been nowhere without her. And I guess we can only walk away today and drive home safely and think they're back together again, and that's the way it should be. I can only ask all of you to take whatever good memories and good feelings you have about both of my parents, but particularly Dad today, and carry that with you. It's the best tribute that you could pay to him. It's what I do every day. I pass that on to my kids and grandkids, and I will remember this afternoon forever. Dad would be embarrassed to have a tribute for himself, but I'm not. And I thank you with all my heart for coming here and saying such beautiful words and sharing such great memories. If you have a glass, raise it, and here's to you, Dad. God bless. Thank you so much.